Welcome to the Deep Dive. We're here to unpack ideas that matter, looking directly at the sources you're interested in.
And today, we're diving into Chapter 7 of Adam Grant's book, Think Again.
Right. Think again. The power of knowing what you don't know. Grant's a big name, #1 bestseller with originals, give and take.
And interestingly, he dedicated the book's prologue to his 3 oldest friends. Maybe a little clue about today's topic.
Could be. We're definitely looking at liking its power, its pitfalls.
Exactly. And for you listening, you're the learner, right? You want to get complex ideas fast, see different sides, maybe have a bit of a chuckle too.
So our mission today is to really dissect this tricky relationship between liking someone and how clearly we think, how we interact.
Yeah, cut through the fluff and get to those key insights from the chapter.
This chapter is called The Just Right Level of Liking. It gets into how our feelings, well, they can open our minds or just slam them shut.
We'll look at that balance connection helping progress, but also creating blind spots. And surprisingly, how good arguments can actually help.
Okay, let's get into it then.
So Grant kicks things off with a really compelling story about Alan Greenspan.
Oh yeah, the former Fed chair.
Right. A guy known for his, intellectual brilliance, but he invested in a Ponzi scheme.
Wow. How did that happen?
Well, that's the interesting part Grant focuses on. It wasn't just a bad tip. It seems his desire for approval from a family friend swayed him.
The friend who was pushing the scheme.
Exactly. The advisor.
Yeah.
It just shows how even, the smartest people can get tripped up by wanting to be liked or wanting to maintain that connection.
It's pretty striking. And wasn't there something about his sister, too?
Yeah, Grant mentions his sister also believed in the fund, which kind of reinforced his decision. Added social proof, I suppose.
But the craziest part, for me at least, was what happened when someone did try to warn him.
Oh, right. A friend pointed out the risks, and Greenspan didn't just ignore him.
He went after him,
Right.
legally, accused him of being cynical.
It's quite extreme. It shows liking didn't just cloud his initial judgment, it made him actively hostile to critical information. He punished the messenger.
It really makes you think, doesn't it? How often have we maybe given an idea more credit just because we like the person saying it?
Or maybe dismiss something because we didn't care for the person.
Hmm.
It's definitely, food for thought.
For sure. But Grant doesn't just focus on the negative side of liking.
No, not at all. He talks about how being in sync, that feeling of connection, can be incredibly powerful for working together.
He gives some great examples like Tina Fey and Amy Poehler.
And the Beatles or Ben and Jerry's, partnerships where that chemistry clearly fueled creativity and success.
It makes sense. When you like and respect someone, collaboration just flows better, right?
It seems intuitive. That positive connection builds trust, makes it easier to build on each other's ideas.
Mm.
But what kind of liking is it? Just friendliness.
Or something deeper, like shared values, mutual respect for skills. That's a good point.
And then Grant kind of flips the script. He brings up this idea that seems contradictory at first, that good fights can actually be really beneficial.
Right, like arguments aren't always bad.
Exactly. He points to research showing kids whose parents argue constructively, keyword being constructively, not nasty fights, actually tend to be more helpful, more compassionate.
So it's not about if parents disagree, but how they disagree. Respectfully.
Precisely. It seems witnessing disagreements handled well teaches valuable skills, like empathy and communication. Maybe avoiding conflict isn't always the best strategy.
Huh. And didn't he also mention something about creative people?
Yeah, another study found that highly creative architects were often more likely to come from homes where there was, a fair amount of disagreement.
So a bit of intellectual sparring might actually spark creativity.
It seems so, which leads him to the Wright brothers.
Ah, yes. Famous collaborators, but also famous arguers, right?
Very much so. They apparently had intense arguments about, everything related to building their airplane. Their father actually encouraged them to debate.
That's interesting. He encouraged it.
Yeah. And the key thing Grant points out is that their arguments, however heated, were fueled by this shared goal and this underlying respect. It wasn't personal.
They were focused on the problem, the task.
Exactly. Grant calls this task conflict, debating ideas versus relationship conflict, which is getting personal and attacking the other person.
And the Wrights were masters of task conflict without letting it poison the relationship. That's a hard balance to strike.
It really is. And it connects to his idea of needing a challenge network.
A challenge network? What's that?
Basically, people in your life who don't just agree with you, but who push back, who criticize your ideas constructively.
The people we naturally tend to avoid sometimes.
Right, because it's uncomfortable. You like agreement, validation. But Grant argues these challenges are crucial for, well, thinking again, for seeing our blind spots.
He tells that story about Brad Bird, the director.
From Pixar, yeah.
Yeah.
The Incredibles.
Bird has this bad manners rule. What was that again?
His rule is basically that not arguing, not engaging with someone's point critically is actually disrespectful. It implies their view isn't worth the effort of real debate.
That's a fascinating way to frame it. Disagreement as a sign of respect.
It is. And he apparently lived it. Grant describes these intense arguments Bird had with his producer, John Walker, while making The Incredibles.
Down to tiny details like character hair.
Yep, even stuff like that. They really went at it.
But the point is, those fights made the movie better.
That's the argument. It pushed both of them, made them sharpen their ideas, question assumptions. Grant says it made them better learners, better leaders.
And wasn't there that example from the sequel, The Goo Baby?
Oh, yeah. That apparently came out of a problem they'd argued about but couldn't solve back on the first film. Years later, the solution emerged, partly thanks to that earlier conflict.
Wow, so those tough conversations can pay off way down the line.
It suggests that working through task conflict, even if it feels tough at the time, can plant seeds for future breakthroughs.
Okay, so liking can connect us, but also blind us. And disagreement, if it's respectful, can actually be really productive.
That seems to be the core tension Grant is exploring, which leads him to this subtle point about framing, of not just agreeing to disagree.
What does he mean by that?
Well, he suggests that just changing how we label a conflict can make a difference, calling it a debate rather than a disagreement.
A debate versus a disagreement, how does that help?
The idea is that disagreement can feel personal, hostile, like you're attacking the person. But framing it as a debate, well, that signals it's about the ideas. It implies an openness to hearing different views.
Okay. It sort of lowers the stakes emotionally, makes it less about winning and more about exploring.
That seems to be the psychological shift. People might share more information, be less defensive. He brings up the Wright brothers again.
With the propeller argument.
Exactly. They had this huge fight about the propeller design, super heated. But Grant notes, the next morning, they just picked it back up, no yelling, just focused work.
And that's when they had the breakthrough.
Right. The intensity was about the problem, the task conflict. Their opposing views almost acted like a propeller for their thinking, pushing them in a new direction.
An adversary as a propeller. I like that image.
It captures how that friction, that challenge, can actually move you forward.
So wrapping this chapter up, it really feels like the goal is finding that sweet spot, that just right level of liking.
Enough connection to collaborate, but enough critical distance to evaluate ideas honestly, even from people we like.
And being willing to engage in that respectful conflict, seeing it not as a threat, but as an engine for better thinking.
Absolutely. It's about welcoming diverse perspectives, challenging ourselves, and realizing that friction, when managed well, often beats easy agreement for getting to truly robust ideas.
So as you're thinking about all this, maybe reflect on your own relationships. How do your feelings about someone liking them a lot, or maybe not so much, affect how open you are to what they have to say?
Yeah, and here's a final thought to chew on. Can you think of a time you dismissed a good idea just because of who said it? Or maybe, bought into a weak idea because you really like the source. Looking back now, what might you rethink about that?